everyone.
Hello.
It's Friday. Do it with vibrato.
Friday.
He's like the Shrek guy. I love it. Isn't that amazing? So welcome, guys. We have an awesome show for you guys today, and we want to get a lot of opinions, and already you guys are pouring in with comments from people we've never heard from. So Bo and I are really excited to hear both sides of this. So what we're talking about, guys, is, of course, the government shutdown was averted. President Trump is going to sign the bill that gives $1.37 billion for the wall, but he is also, I just want to make sure everyone understands, declaring a national emergency about the wall, and he is asking for, I believe, $7 billion. Do we know?
I think $8
$8 billion for border wall, considering that the people he's considering a national emergency are the people at the border. The immigration is an emergency. So our question from Bo and me to you is twofold. One, is this a national emergency, straight up? And two, does this leave a precedent, meaning will this allow other presidents to do and take more action and have less checks and balances?
Precedent and president.
It's hard to do.
Very close words.
Very, very true. A lot of you are writing in and saying this is unconstitutional and would be a dictator, but a lot of you are saying this is the right thing to do. Christopher Cook from Facebook says the Supreme Court will do the right thing and allow the building of the wall. Why we brought the Supreme Court in, just so you know, is because when he declares this, it's going to go to the courts. Someone's going to say this isn't an emergency.
It'll be challenged.
And it'll be challenged. So that's the sort of short end little version of it. So we want to know, is it an emergency? Do you consider immigration right now an emergency? And two, if it is allowed, do you think this is setting the standard for presidents to be able to have more executive power than they have in the past? And does that frighten you? Because that frightens both sides of the aisle. So we're getting tons of comments in. Oh, this is offline again. I'm sorry, Kelly.
Can we read some of the comments?
Yes, please.
Okay. So Rosemary Hagen-Newman says, go Trump, build that wall. We've got Catherine Velasquez. This is not necessary and is clearly an overreach by an egomaniac. Liz Dutois, just wait until there's a national emergency on climate change, healthcare, and education. Then the Republicans will be crying foul, but will have no leg to stand on. Terry Mae Scott, Ted Poe, former representative of Texas, says it is necessary.
You guys are like boom, 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 boom. It's really interesting. And Nancy Pelosi, just so you know, she's Speaker of the House, said if this is allowed to continue, then what will happen is I will call, or someone else can call an emergency, a national emergency on gun violence, school shooting, climate change. This leaves that open, and that's not what I think Republicans would want to hear. Right. So there's some Republicans, Bo. Explain those 7.
Yeah, I think Marco Rubio has expressed some disinterest on this. Rand Paul, I believe, as well. They're concerned because they realize that any executive power like this, I think I read that there's about 32 national emergencies that are currently still in effect. These are by, 3 are by Trump, some are by Obama, some by George W. Bush, some go all the way back as Clinton and Carter and people like that. So this has happened before. It hasn't really been dealt with in terms of reappropriating funds of this measure. Now here's where we get into the weeds a bit, but I got to explain this because if I don't, it won't make sense to you guys.
And I'll act it out as he's explaining it.
Yeah. So, well, first of all,
hair in my eye? I'm good now.
I think so.
Okay, I got it.
First of all, once he declares the state of national emergency, Congress, if they oppose it, can now create a rebuttal to that, and they can say, we express our displeasure that the fact you've done this. If they get the majority in the House and the Senate, they deliver it to the president, who can then veto it, and unless it's overridden by a supermajority, then it goes into effect. But here's what it really all comes down to, guys. This is in terms of national emergencies. So in 1951, there was a Supreme Court case, because this is where it's all going to come down to. It is Youngstown Sheet 2 versus Sawyer. You may know this case. It's where President Truman seized all steel. And Supreme Court said, you can't do that. Now, there are 3 different ways.
So I'm just waiting for comments. I know they're really...
Yeah, sorry. Oh, sorry. There are 3 categories of executive action, okay, where the Supreme Court ruled you do have authority or you don't. The biggest one, the last category, is the following. This is where Congress has already delegated the authority to act. That's where presidential power is at its apex, at its zenith. So this is Justice Robert Jackson. At that time, this is 1951, this is what he said. When the president acts pursuant to an express or implied authorization of Congress, his authority is at its maximum, for it includes all that he possesses in his own right, plus all that Congress can delegate. So here's break down what that means. If Congress has already legislated on something, the president's executive actions are emboldened by that action. So therefore, when you have the 2006 Secure Fence Act, which was already passed, the Immigration and Nationality Act, and then the most recent one, which he's about to sign, what the Supreme Court will say is Congress has already delegated authority because they have voted on it. They have agreed to borders. They have agreed to fences. Therefore, the president, in reappropriating funds, has the absolute executive authority to do it. So this is going to come back to 1951 in a Supreme Court case. It gets a little in the weeds, and I know that that's a lot of information to throw your way, but essentially there's 3 different categories of executive action that the Supreme Court ruled on in 1951. You can't seize an entire industry. That's why they struck Truman down. But if Congress has already passed laws on the books that support what you're doing, it gives executive action more privilege.
So does that mean that I can actually act on gun control? Because there's been gun control?
Possibly, yes.
Climate change,
Yep,
anything.
possibly,
So that really,
yes.
that can be abortion, that can be a lot of things. So that
It's a lot of
opens up the
things,
door.
yeah.
The other thing I want to say, guys, is the Founding Fathers built something called checks and balances. So you are the executive branch, I am the legislative branch, the Congress, and then this plant is the Supreme Court, the judicial branch. If we allow the executive branch to have this much power, meaning I can now use money from Congress that we haven't said yes to, this starts to get wobbly. This starts to get a little wonky. And the idea is everyone has a check and a balance. So that if he wants to use, or she, the president, wants to use funds, the Congress has to say, okay, that's called appropriations.
Right.
That's the money. That's the money bags. And they have to sign off. What he's trying to do, or she's trying to do in the future is, I don't need Congress. I'm overstepping Congress and making a national emergency because I think it is one. And $8 billion will go to this wall because I say so. That, to a lot of people, even Trump supporters, is an un-American thing to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and
okay.
we probably should break down to where the money's coming from. I know this has been on some of the news reports as well. It's coming largely from a military construction budget. So it's about $8 billion. It's broken down into about 4 different categories. But a large part of this budget is for construction on military bases in, some Congress members are going to have a problem with this. They're going to say, hey, this is for a construction project in my district and I want that money and you're taking it away from me. It's not coming from disaster relief. It's not coming from FEMA. That was a big point of contention, whether Puerto Rico being rebuilt, all the areas affected by Katrina, hurricanes, national disasters, whether money would be taken from those funds. It is not. That's not where the money's coming from.
But it is being taken from federal funds.
Federal funds.
So it is federal, but not
largely Department
FEMA.
of Defense. Yeah,
Got
largely
it.
Department of Defense that are construction budgets. So like military bases that have been affected by a hurricane, rebuilding those. That's one area that it would be taken from.
So I'm just going to read some of your comments, guys. Joy Chapman Hinkle says he wouldn't have to call a national emergency if he kept his promise to get Mexico to pay for the wall. That's true. Shauna Nab Clement, he talks about himself too much. Lynn Einhart, though, says, do it. God is with you. MJ Matthews, it's 100% necessary. Yep. He is the only one that is putting country before party. Nancy's hate for Trump has overpowered her love of country. Not that I'm confident that in the last 32 years she's been in office, she ever cared about her country or this would have been handled already. And then there's some people responding to that. Eileen Heimel, I'm so proud of my president. Brenda Smith, build the damn wall. Pam France, I support my president. Build the wall. Lots of people saying that over and over and over again. So Patricia Wright, Trump said it's not an emergency, but he was going to do it anyway. What about the citizens of this country getting killed by a citizen? Why aren't we thinking about them? Why didn't he invite them to the Rose Garden? He doesn't care about those people. He's using them to benefit that. He could give a bleep about them. Wake up, Republicans.
Can I just inject something for you guys to discuss? So for all of those people, I would assume that if Bernie Sanders gets in, say, in the next presidential term, and wants to declare a state of emergency for the opioid crisis, right? And divert a lot of money from a bloat. Some people say the defense budget's bloated.
Yep.
So would these people be okay with Bernie saying, I'm going to take some money from the Defense Department and I'm going to put it towards opioid addiction as a national emergency?
I would guess it would depend on how he was approaching it and where the funds are coming from and what specifically they're used for. We have a debate here about whether this is a national emergency, humanitarian crisis. Pelosi said she wouldn't give $1 to this, and they've obviously given 1.375 at this point. So, I always viewed it as, I interviewed Diamond and Silk about a couple weeks ago. They said the president's playing chess while Pelosi's playing checkers. I kind of agree with that now. I didn't really see it at the time, but I kind of see what they meant at the time. I would say that, yeah, if there is legislative authority and legislative precedent for funding for things of this measure, then the president does have executive authority to do it. So potentially, Jason, if Bernie Sanders became president and rediverted funds based on past legislative action, it is theoretically possible.
I'll tell you what I think. There's no way this is happening.
You don't think it'll
No,
survive?
not
See, I
one.
disagree. I think it will.
Not 1 inch of me thinks that Republicans will allow a loophole, because this is a get out of jail free card for the president, to allow that to happen, because if a Democratic president becomes president, they open up all the gateways. There is no way a Marco Rubio would allow this to happen, because if they're playing chess, they've got to think 4 steps ahead, and that's in 2020 if a Democrat takes over. So they've got to start thinking ahead. I think the Supreme Court will knock this out. I think there'll be an injunction. I think this is actually a distraction from Russia, because I think he knows it won't go through. I think it's all a big distraction.
I disagree. I think he did this specifically because he knows it will go through. He knows who's on the court. He's got Kavanaugh. He's got Gorsuch. I think he thinks he is going to win
If the court approves it, they're throwing themselves out of power. I mean, if the Supreme Court approves the president...
Here, come in. Okay.
Overreaching the checks and balances, then that essentially renders the Supreme Court in the next move kind of out of the game. So wouldn't it be in the best interest of the Supreme Court to keep the checks and balances in check? I
don't think it's at all about it's not about how well it's going to do for the Supreme Court. It's about the Constitution.
It's about the case you make. I don't know if you guys watched when Dr. Drew was on the show on Wednesday. He said something really interesting. So I asked him, I said, Dr. Drew, we were talking about the El Chapo Act, and I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but Ted Cruz has presented this bill where $14 billion in assets of El Chapo could be used and seized and provided for a border wall. And I flat out asked Dr. Drew, I said, Dr. Drew, you know the fentanyl crisis right now. You know what's going on with the opioid crisis. You know where it's coming from largely. Do you think that these funds, and I was just referring to El Chapo, I wasn't referring about the actual funding from Congress and from national emergency. Do you think these funds would help to stop fentanyl abuse and fentanyl pouring across the southern border? And he said yes. So, I trust his opinion. I know he knows the subject far better than many of us do.
But then what if Bernie Sanders is president and he thinks my executive action will stop fentanyl with a national emergency? Like, that's even more clearly going to stop fentanyl than maybe a wall stopping fentanyl. I just think this opens up the power to the executive branch that both parties don't want. I can't see a strict constitutionalist agreeing to this.
But I go back to what border agents have said.
You can't appropriate funds without allowing Congress. That's Article 1 of the Constitution. You can't take money without Congress. You can't. It's Article 1. So unless you want to change the Constitution, which the Supreme Court really doesn't like to do, you're not going to allow this to happen, in my opinion.
So my question then, Tori, is why would Democrats have voted for wall funding in the past? Does it not seem like they're just saying no because of who's in office?
No.
Because they voted for billions. Billions upon billions.
I agree, but those are different types of walls. I don't think they want his type of steel walls.
We're not talking about the big concrete time. We're talking about steel slats.
Right.
We're talking about enhanced walls, enhanced fencing. We're talking about barbed wire, things of that sort. At 10 specific spots. We're not talking about the entire border, guys. It's not the Rio Grande. We're talking about 10
But is this a national emergency?
I would say yes.
I would say no. So that's a hard yes and a hard no.
Well, but considering when you look at the number of deaths that have been caused by opioid abuse,
what about opioids? Why do we talk about
cocaine,
opioid? That's an emergency, not
fentanyl.
But what about the opioid epidemic?
But look where it's coming from.
Okay, well, we're going to read some of these comments so we don't get in a fight. Ethan Helhowski says, we have too much debt in the U.S. What money are they talking about? It's all credit. But Naomi says, finally, action is being taken by a president to keep our country safe. Kimberly Matusek says, I feel like Trump calling this a national emergency is fear-mongering, and I think this will sit in the courts before it's ever put into place. Bin31 says, so Republicans and Democrats found a bipartisan agreement and still an emergency was called. No words, and contractors still haven't been paid from shutdown. It's not an emergency.
Also, the opioid addiction also is mainly from pharmaceutical products.
A lot of them, yes. Yes, of course. A lot, yes. But you're getting, but no one can deny the pouring of drugs over the border. And places that are also not just ports of entry. I've heard that argument made that, it's just coming through ports of entry. That's simply untrue. They seize fentanyl by the millions of pounds coming across the border that are not at ports of entry. So we've got to pay attention to
let me ask you a question. A hurricane, national emergency or not?
Yeah, of course.
The Hondurans and Guatemalans that are sitting there that are not storming anything, national emergency, you say yes.
Yes, and even Mexico has recognized that.
I can't make that comment.
But Mexico has recognized that as well.
I can't get there, guys. I'm not there.
We've got other countries that are admitting as much.
Well, other countries, I don't care much. I care about my values.
There's a Central American flood of people who want to come here. And there's an economic reason, an economic incentive for them to do so.
I understand.
No one would ever question that.
Right.
But when you think you can come here and work on loopholes on our systems when there's human trafficking, sex trafficking, drugs pouring through, people getting addicted to it, how is that not a national crisis?
Because I don't think it's happening in that rate like you're talking about. I think that is built up.
Well, the articles, I think, would disagree with you.
Okay,
but
well, we disagree on that. Ethan Helhowski says it happened for years. Presidents take money from our future Americans. This is interesting because actually there's 59 national emergencies that are, and some are still in effect. So it's not that we don't think presidents can't call national emergencies, and they can do it with terrorism, they can do it with hurricanes, they can do it with all that. Earthquakes, they can do all of that. But the problem is you can't have funds spent from federal funding without Congress. That's what's in Article 1 of the Constitution. And what he's trying to do is say, I want $8 billion of federal money to go there. Well, that's not allowed without Congress saying that's okay.
Don't you think the Supreme Court is going to say, then why did Congress give you 1.375?
No, I don't think they do it like that. They say yay or nay because it's not.
But it's an all or none. If you're giving 1.375 billion and Pelosi says I'm not
because
giving
that's
a dollar,
in the Constitution.
You have now compromised.
Because Congress is supposed to appropriate funds. The president isn't.
So why would Congress appropriate 1.375 bill and not 8?
They feel that that's the right number. It doesn't matter. The power
but
isn't in his power.
But they're agreeing that walls work then.
But that doesn't matter to the Supreme Court. It doesn't.
Yeah, it would. Because they're looking at precedent.
The constitutional crisis here is not, what does the Congress say? It's, do you have that power?
I have a fundamental
That's
issue
the
with
problem.
anyone who does not think this is truly a humanitarian crisis, which we know that it is, and also a national emergency. There's too many people dying. There are people that are losing their lives senselessly over people coming.
And you don't think gun violence and opioid epidemic is worse and more of a national emergency?
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. You have this happening daily, on a daily
people
basis.
People are dying daily.
School shootings.
Yeah, but homicides are happening in Chicago daily. Do we deal with that as well?
That's what I'm saying.
It's more an important issue than the wall.
Okay, well, that's your opinion. I appreciate that.
Okay, so I'm with Tori on a lot of this. Also, those earrings are fabulous. I just want to say thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think this is offline again. I'm sorry, guys.
Here's the thing. Here's how the movie ends. I hate to just break it to the people who
Tell
don't
us
want to
how the
hear
movie
this.
ends, Bo.
The movie ends like this. A wall's being built. It's just the truth. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. Now, how much of that wall is built and across which ports of entry, which border spots, that's up for debate.
But what's the question today? Is this
built.
a national emergency? And we just both disagree, and it's hard for us to... My thing is this. Do you want a president allowed that much power?
In this particular case, yes.
But does that
I believe it's deserved.
And do you think...
I believe it's deserved.
And
understand that this goes beyond... This is not me saying I just agree with his campaign promise. I really don't care about the campaign promise, to be honest with you. He's fulfilled as many for me as I need. It's about really security. It really is. And it's affecting people all the way up as Maryland. President Trump in his press conference today addressed a woman from Maryland, and she showed the picture of her husband who died. You have, I don't know if you guys know what MS-13 is. It's a terrible gang from Central America. I think it's either Salvadoran, perhaps. These are being recruited by the day, okay? They're coming here, and it's not just about drugs. It's about murder. So... if this crisis is allowed to continue without the proper measures that we need, we're not addressing it. Congress has punted on this many, many times.
It doesn't matter what you think if Congress has it or not. The Constitution says they get to decide, not you.
Then why did Obama want it?
It doesn't matter what or who the opinion is. The power doesn't reside in the executive power.
You have to explain to the American people why Obama and Democrats have voted for it in the past.
Why do I have to explain that? Because I think they thought that was the right thing to do.
And
they don't think $8 billion
so just because Donald Trump's name on it means we can't do it.
I think you're definitely...
It's semantics. I mean, that's exactly what it is.
I'm saying it's
Donald Trump's
you say
name
semantics, I say Constitution. So people are saying I'm 71 and I've okay, I don't really know what that means. If you would build it a quarter at a time every 4 to 6 years, we could afford that easier than all at one time, and the money they allowed is a fair amount to do just that.
You know what's ironic is that that's an interesting snicker. It's interesting to me that Democrats have voted against to reduce the defense budget. So Trump increases the defense budget, and then
no, I'm gonna go.
Tori, come back, please. Tori, come back. No.
It's just interesting to me how, if Democrats have voted to reduce the defense budget, and then Republicans vote to increase the defense budget. So why in the world, if that's the case, and Trump is trying to take the money from that defense budget, why in the world would that be a problem?
Because it's the amount of money that he's asking for, $8 billion. I mean, that's what it comes down to. You're asking why $1.6 billion dollars is okay and $8 billion isn't. It's because Congress has decided that 1.6 is the appropriate amount. $8 billion is not an appropriate amount.
But remember that he asked for 5 in the beginning, and then he's getting 1.375. Right?
Right.
So the appropriate amount, as far as appropriations...
By the way, my feeling is, we've had a lot of conversations here that constantly say the Democrats don't want border security. $1.6 billion worth says that they do want border security.
And they're voting for walls, are they not? Enhanced
They're not
fences,
they're not
steel
voting for a
slats,
$5 billion wall. Like Ethan, who wrote in earlier and said that they're spending the money. They don't feel like the future is $8 billion. We have a deficit. He has blown up the deficit.
But here's
blown up the deficit. Correct? He has, right?
Well, not nearly as much as President Obama did.
Well,
yes,
more than Bill Clinton did, who actually got us down to zero.
Obama tripled it.
So okay, but regardless, it was when Obama tripled it, all the Republicans freaked out.
But
all of the Republicans
Jason, do you not
freaked out.
think at all that there's a chance that Democrats are doing this just because President Trump is the president? Do you think that that's at all a possibility?
I don't think a $4 billion difference is something that they're. I don't think it makes a difference who the president was. If it's $4 billion.
So do you think if President Obama, if he was still the president, or President Biden, or whatever the case is, if they declared a national emergency and said, we need this funding, would you support it then?
Well, why don't we flip it this way? If the Republicans don't agree with Bernie Sanders to give the opioid crisis a national emergency, do you think that's simply because it's Bernie Sanders, or they don't feel the opioid crisis?
I think it works on both ways. Rather than answering a question with a question, I'm asking, do you think under a different president that this would still be voted for? But I just don't agree with answering a question with a question. I'm just trying to ask you.
But you framed it in a way that you only have one outcome. So I think
it's pretty clear that they're doing it because they want resistance to Trump.
Right. That's clearly you feel that way.
Well, but a lot of people think that way because there's a hashtag resistance, and I think that's where a lot of it comes from.
Yeah, I mean, but I own the hashtag resistance too on the other side. So it's who's resisting who?
Well, I think Trump is trying to do the right thing for the American people.
Well,
I don't think this is...
Of course, and that's perfectly, if that's on the basis of what you're going on, and that's your perspective, then I can see why you are unwavering, no matter what the amount of money is, on supporting it.
Right.
But the flip side is...
Here's what I go with, Jason, is what Border Patrol agents say. Because they're experts. They're the people who have to deal with this, and they're saying this is what we need.
Left.
This is what we need.
All right, let me read some more comments just from people, just so we can get them in. Pam France, I support the president. Doris Dilla, go Trump, build the wall, keep the drugs out. Where's my... I can't get any...
You want to go to the hard threads, right?
No. Oh, do we have to, or we...
You don't have to. It's your choice.
We only have a minute left, right?
Till hard threads.
Till hard threads.
Yes.
Okay. Listen, this conversation is going to continue all day long. Bo's going to be with us in the 10:30, 11:30, 12, 1. So all of you are going to have your...
12 and 2.
12 and 2, sorry. So we want to hear from you all day long. This is obviously a very interesting conversation that we're going to have all day long. There are two sides to this, and we want to hear from both. So please watch us live or on your local TV station and give us your comments. We need to hear it, particularly from the border areas, because I think Bo and I agree that that's really...
If you guys are down in Texas or Arizona or San Diego, I would personally love to hear from you because we're going to be reading a lot of comments today. So it'd be nice to hear from people in those areas.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon. Bye.
It's important to be a positive member in your community as it is to be a positive individual in your family. My parents came here as refugees through a Catholic charity on March 20th, 1979. When they first arrived here, my dad, he dabbled in restaurant work as a server, busboy, just part-time work. My mom was always a sous chef. In 1986, the opportunity presented itself to move to this location to open the first restaurant. When we first opened up there, it was a lot of the times when the POWs first settling in the area. They were able to share common stories and common bonds, and that feeling of where they were kind of locked up, and they're pretty much were serving their time over there. So since then, we've hosted the POW parties in some way, shape, or form from this very physical location. Every year, they would always reconvene here around the Tet New Year. So the Tet New Year usually falls between end of January till about first week of February. Some were driving from about 2-3 hours away. Some lived in the area. Some flew in for the event. It's something that they look forward to every year. You never see a group of men in their 60s and 70s reconvene and talk about times when they're late teens, in their 20s, fighting wars overseas and coming back here and meeting each other and serving their time abroad. I grew up around these guys. They've subjected me to pretty much whatever they had to endure from time to time in terms of life lessons and character building. Anything that comes to servicemen or first responders or things like that nature, I see the sacrifice and dedication for these guys. So that's why we wouldn't be where we are today without paying homage. The POW party is always an event that he looked forward to. Anything relating to the servicemen in the restaurant is something that my dad always felt fond of being who he was. Those little nuances that you do, especially when someone passes, it kind of helps make you feel as if they're still there. So being, from an Asian family, if there was a tradition that had to be carried out, to us, it's always humbling to do that. It's always humbling to, hey, let's move forward, let's move out, and let's carry this honor and tradition forward. Because every year the numbers are, getting smaller and smaller. But the thing is, like, you want to give back. We can't see the servicemen up front as often as we'd like to, so what about the first responders in the area? One of my friends, he was like, hey, I know some firefighters, they work Christmas Eve, and I said, hey, can we bring them lunch? And they were like, oh yeah, they'd love that. I have 2 nieces and a nephew. I said, hey, you know what, these kids every year, you can give them the newest toy, you can take them to Disney, you can take them trips abroad, but the lessons of humility and being a nice individual to the community is probably going to weigh more to them in their lifetimes. They came along with me to the 3 fire stations in Arlington last year. And this past Christmas Eve, we were able to go to the Arlington County Police Station, deliver food to the guys on roll call, and then we also delivered food to the NICU ward at the Virginia Hospital Center as well. My nieces and nephews, they enjoyed it because the thing is, it was a lesson to them. It's like, hey, I enjoy giving these food because you guys are working today. So that's all I want to teach you guys. If you look at pretty much a picture in '86 and versus 2019, you see how much changed around us, but we're still here. That's a testament to our dedication to the area and to what we've done in terms of sacrifices and dedication and homage and respect to POWs and servicemen. Play your part. I think that was just like a lesson taught from my mother and my father.